Boker Tov and good morning. I'm Rabbi Steve Moskowitz of Congregation Lador Vador here on Long Island. And this is Monday Musings, a 15-minute spiritual kickstart to the week. I am joined this morning by Rabbi Lauren Berkun, who is Vice President of Rabbinic Initiatives of the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America. Lauren and I have known each other for many, many years, as I think everyone knows. The Shalom Hartman Institute is a place that is near and dear to my heart. I study there every summer, learning in Jerusalem, and it's part of Lauren's leadership that the programming is just so wonderful at the Hartman Institute and refreshes and renews my soul. Certainly missed it this past summer, Lauren. I'm sure you did as well, being in Jerusalem. It's such a big part of our year to be there. But I do appreciate all of the wonderful online programming that you organized. I'm sure you didn't sleep as well for about a month with all of that online programming. So for those who don't know, Rabbi Lauren Berkun also gave the closing benediction at the Democratic National Convention this past summer. So she was the Jewish representative for those who had any doubt there. And so I wanted to have Lauren on the show, as I like to call it, to talk about that prayer that you offered, that beautiful prayer, and how it came about and what your struggles were in terms of writing it. I certainly admired that I think it was only 40 seconds long. So I don't think I could ever speak in under a minute. So Lauren, tell us a little bit about that prayer and your struggles and how you did it.
All right. Well, first of all, Steve, thank you for welcoming me to this show. And I really feel like we're part of this family, this tribe of Hartman rabbis. And I really missed being with you in Jerusalem this summer. But great to be with you on Zoom. And yes, I'm living in Miami. My husband is a congregational rabbi in Miami. And so for many years, I've been working for Hartman, but also been kind of immersed in a synagogue community as a spouse of a rabbi. And when I got the call to offer the benediction, I was deeply honored, excited on one level to have a national platform to bring some words, some spiritual words, and hopefully words of wisdom. But then I was also terrified, frankly. I was mired in that conflict that for decades now, as I've been working with rabbis and as I've been married to a rabbi in a congregation, that tension that rabbis have always felt around an election season, and particularly in a contentious election season. What exactly is my role? What exactly do I want to say as a rabbi that will not alienate anyone in my community? And I can say in my community here in Miami, we have a very diverse community in my synagogue politically. And also as someone who works for an organization that has pluralism as a core value and a mission of our organization, I also wanted to make sure that whatever I would say would uphold those values and would help me represent both my congregation and my organization. And I was only given 40 seconds. So I had lots of challenges. And so I think that I really fell back on what I see as my particular role as a rabbi, which is rabbi as teacher, and teaching Jewish values has been a core of the work we do at Hartman, and a tool that we hope can help rabbis and empower rabbis to lead courageously, particularly when it's so it can be so difficult to lead in a diverse community without marginalizing anyone or offending anyone. And I think that one of the biggest challenges rabbis face in this election 2020 is that on top of that tension and challenge, which rabbis have always faced, we're in this hyper political, polarized environment of partisanship in which almost anything we say is interpreted through a partisan lens. And it makes it even more likely that anything you say may offend someone or may alienate someone. And at the same time, the flip side of that is many of us feel there are existential stakes in this election and that we need to speak out more than ever. So I see those as at odds with each other, and I felt that tension myself very deeply. feeling strongly about the stakes of this election and wanting to use my voice, but also recognizing in this polarized environment that it's more delicate and difficult than ever to speak in a way that can be heard by diverse communities.
I think that's, look, the prayer was beautiful, and I think it was well said, and I shared it with others, and people responded, positively in terms of, what you offered. I was struck that it's a prayer. A prayer is sort of, right, a prayer and politics. I mean, it's like I feel like I've worked out a little bit more, a sermon and saying that that's teaching, but a prayer is something that's, I mostly think as something that's going to uplift and offer healing, and to like put that over, layer that over the political, I think is an enormous struggle. And I might have almost said, thanks but no thanks, because I'm just not. I'm not. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I hear that very much. This conflict of what is the role of religion in politics, and I guess, first, we know historically that America is a deeply religious society, and while I think we as Jews have always been concerned about the separation of church and state and the way that that's been important for us as a minority group to thrive and flourish here, at the same time, I do think there's something about the role of religion in civic life in elevating character and elevating, helping humans like strive to be the best that we can be, calling us to our sense of duty and obligation, calling us to our sense of morality, frankly. And so I think there can be a role. It is, it's a delicate role, but I felt that actually offering a prayer felt like a comfort zone for me as a rabbi, to be able to say, okay, what are our human yearnings right now? What are our dilemmas as a society? And that's where I came to some of my themes of like, what does it mean to create a home, since we're all stuck at home now with coronavirus, and an election season is a time where we think about what is the national home that we are creating together. I thought about home also because we've just finished a year at the Hartman Institute of focusing on this theme of home and Jewish peoplehood, and where are we at home as American Jews, and how do we see Israel as a home? So those kind of themes came together for me, and I
think it's that's a wonderful way of looking at it in terms of prayer being sort of almost, you see it as an easier venue or than the sermon or the teaching. The other thing I was reflecting on as you were speaking and talking about is that we are the teacher and the interpreter. I mean, it's not, we still are offering our own teachings and our own interpretations of Jewish values. So how would you respond to someone who says, look, I just think rabbis should just not talk about politics and only talk about Torah? So what's your response to that? Because I think every rabbi has heard that quite frequently.
I think it depends how you understand the word politics. If politics means endorsing a candidate, I can understand the position that rabbis, both the legal argument that rabbis certainly from the pulpit should not endorse candidates. But if you understand politics as the vehicle through which we create the societies in which we live, and the actions that we take to create the societies that we want for ourselves and for our children, I think we are always speaking to politics. We are always, in all of the ways that we're teaching Jews how to be in the world, we are hopefully influencing the way they make decisions. And part of those decisions is, who do I vote for? What kind of government and what kind of policies will best enable me to actualize my values in the place in which I live?
Yeah, I agree, and I reject the idea that, the sermon and the talking about Torah is just, interpreting, one small verse in terms of how what it meant to Abraham back then, as opposed to what it means to us today. Talking about politics is not, obviously not endorsing one politician over another, but Torah has to say something to contemporary events. Otherwise, what's the point? If it doesn't speak to us today, and it's not relevant to our own lives, then what are we doing all this for? Almost. It doesn't. I'm not so interested in just what did Abraham exactly say to Isaac, as much as how does that influence my relationship with my own children, and how do I talk to my own children? Just to kind of parse it out.
Another way to say it, Steve, is that I think there's two orientations when we're teaching for the aim and the purpose of teaching a Jewish value. And one is I'm teaching Jewish values to shape character, to build my community. And the other is to say, no, I'm teaching Jewish values because I think there's a particular political expression that can be learned from that value. An example might be, the Jewish value of saving life, each life being tantamount to an entire world, that should mobilize us around gun reform. That might be one strategy a rabbi employs. And the other way to teach is, no, I'm teaching Jewish values because the value important to me in this moment is pluralism and holding a community together that is fractured, that is divided. And that's where I feel there's a tension today, because in some ways, even when we're teaching for character, if character's on the ballot, as many would argue it is in this election, even moral discourse becomes partisan discourse, at least in the way that some interpret it. So it's complicated. And
there are competing Jewish values. And that's what I was saying earlier. The rabbi is choosing which value they are going to elevate over the other, in terms of, like you're saying, okay, on this Shabbat, I'm going to elevate pluralism and how we're all one community. On another one, I'm going to elevate pikuach nefesh, saving a life, and that's going to influence, what I might say or believe about gun reform. I think there's this, each rabbi kind of creates that own hierarchy that influences how he or she is going to teach. So, and someone sitting in the pew could see it, in the opposite way. And that's where that's that tension, right? Like, no, that rabbi, that's not the most important Jewish value. The most important Jewish value is, and this is the response I got, the most important thing is about anti-Semitism. And you missed the mark not talking about anti-Semitism. And as opposed to talking about that, I spoke about Black Lives Matter in terms of this past high holidays. So I think they both obviously come from Jewish values and Jewish concerns.
Absolutely.
How we prioritize really is where it's a great illustration of where that tension becomes so highlighted in terms of we are making the choices.
Absolutely. And sometimes we're making those choices because we have deemed a certain value the primary, most important value. It's our greatest passion. It's where we want to exercise our energy as a rabbi. And sometimes it's because as the leader of a community, we are assessing what does the community need in this moment and how can I use my leadership to help them? And it could be that our community is already really energized around a value that I also hold, like fighting anti-Semitism, but I'm noticing that people may not be concerned enough about another value. And so I'm using that moment to teach, to make sure that people aren't complacent about a different value. It's not to say this is the most important or the only value, but we are teaching and we're noticing in the community, where the gaps are and where Torah is most needed. And then in other times, what we see is that people are just in pain. People are feeling lonely and disconnected. And what people need the most in this moment is to feel belonging. And then we're going to focus on values or teaching or praying in ways that help people feel a sense of connection and belonging. And it's just the constant assessment as leaders of where is my role? How can I contribute as a leader? And what does my community need?
Yeah, but so you highlighted another source of tension, which is that the leader deciding what he or she thinks people need to hear versus what they want to hear, because people often bristle at what being told what they need to hear, because that's saying that I'm reading the wrong thing, or I'm paying attention to the wrong thing, or my concerns are not the ideal concerns. And so no one likes to hear that, and no one likes to be, called to account.
For sure. Who is it that said comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfort?
I don't know, but that is what I was thinking about too. So we both failed to cite that. So yeah, but it is, and I think the rabbi who does too much of afflicting the comfortable, that is a source of tension. I mean, I think the rabbi has to balance, how often you're standing up there and telling people, this is what I think, everybody needs to do, or everybody needs to think, or this is where everybody's wrong, because no one wants to be told they're wrong. I don't like it. So I'm sure
no one liked the prophets in the Bible, right? That's where the danger of the prophetic
Yes.
role of saying, you're all asleep, I have to awaken you to a set of moral obligations that you are neglecting. No one likes that. And yet we know that's a sacred and holy role. And I agree. I think it's about balance. And it's about, as we learned from adaptive leadership theory, it's about knowing what your community can bear in terms of change, in terms of tochacha, of criticism, and then kind of calibrating your voice accordingly.
Yeah, and the other thing I like to teach about, the prophets didn't have any friends. They were loved, in later generations, hundreds and hundreds of years later, or thousands of years later. So that in their own generation, they were despised. So you can't be an effective teacher if you're despised. There needs to be love and appreciation. So there's just the prophets weren't teachers, and I do very much, relish the role of teacher. And I think you're right that's what needs to have primacy in terms of that is our first and foremost role as rabbis, is to be a teacher and to communicate values. It is our own interpretations, but a teacher is also about creating love for the tradition and creating love for Jewish values in general, not just what I believe or what I think is most important.
And I think it's also, for me, it's really important to embrace as a teacher that religious humility to say, as I am teaching, I'm always learning, and I'm always myself a student and struggling, and recognizing that there are, as you've pointed out, there's a matrix of Jewish values sometimes at odds with each other, and we're all really trying our best to live up to the ideals and the aspirations of our tradition in an environment that's really complex.
Yes, it is. So why don't we conclude, if you don't mind? So were you how did you decide your setting for,
I was mocked mercilessly for over Judaizing my background. Well, first of all, here's the funny thing. So they told me they were going to pre-record me in my home, but it had to look like it was nighttime because they wanted it to look like it was happening live.
Oh, that's interesting.
11 p.m. when it was going to broadcast. So they come to my home and everyone's masked and I'm told to leave the room. So we're trying to be as safe as possible. And they have to cover all the windows to make it look like it's nighttime. And I had to come up with a little corner. And I thought, I'm the rabbi. There's an imam, a Catholic priest, and me. So I had to make it look as Jewish. We didn't want to do it in the synagogue for a lot of reasons. And my orienting theme was home and the meaning of home. So I wanted to be in my home. So yeah, I just kind of grabbed all my Judaica and created a little corner.
I was like, oh my God, Lauren has this Judaica corner in her house.
I kind of gathered it together, but then people on Twitter, I guess, I don't follow Twitter, but I guess people were a little bit mocking me for setting up a Judaica store in my background.
It's very hard.
I got a 10 out of 10 on Room Rater, which I guess is a hard thing to get.
I don't know. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, I guess Room Raters where people rate your Zoom background.
Oh, I am clearly going to fail.
I got a 10 out of 10. So so as much as people mocked me, I guess someone thought it was a nice background.
I think it's very hard. How do you create a Jewish, ambiance and a Jewish background, just for in the screen. I mean, like it's a very difficult.
In my office, you see, I have my Hartman.
I know you got the pomegranates. You got Yehuda's new book.
Here I have, this is Dr. Yehuda Kurtzer, president of Shalom Hartman Institute of North America's new book, The New Jewish Canon. Book club coming soon. Maybe you will lead a book club in your congregation with this amazing book. So.
That's great. That's great. You've done an amazing job with the background. And also, first of all, let me just thank you. I'm grateful for our friendship, of course, and for all the learning that you helped to organize and teach at the Shalom Hartman Institute, and for you sharing a bit of your struggles. That prayer was quite beautiful that you offered, and I admire your courage and that you were able to, give us inspiration in 40 seconds, something that I'm still aspiring to. So thank you, Lauren. Thank you for joining us. It's been great learning with you.
You too. Stay healthy and safe.